Greetings, Internet, and welcome to another fantabulous, fun-filled episode of the Comic Watchers Show. I'm your host, Matt Meyer. With me is Nicholas Osborne. Mighty Mike Eakins was actually with us. We promise, we swear, we're not making this up. And then Homeboy is out in Virginia and is in a tornado warning right now. So, Mike, literally go get to safety right now, which is what he tells us he's doing. No show for you, unless everything's cool, and then you can jump in. But this week, a measly 4 days after America's 245th birthday, we're going to be talking Captain America this week. There's been some major moves and major discourse happening with the Sentinel of Liberty. And yeah, there's all kinds of fun culture war things to get into. And it's not typically where we go on this show, but yeah, we're doing it. But first, we kind of want to talk, and there's a method to our madness here, about X Factor number 10 and the subsequent fallout of writer Leah Williams' pretty gnarly mishandling of a particular issue within it, and the fallout thereof. And Nick, do you want to just kind of, for those who may have been living under a rock when this issue came out, do you want to kind of discuss the topic at hand a little bit?
Yeah, it's a conversation on the discourse of comics and the discourse that we find within comics. So it's a discourse on the discourse for comics. If you can follow along with this, X Factor was... It's one of those. So X Factor was, pretty much a darling in the X fandom for the Krakoa era. This was one of the most beloved books that we found out first was getting cut short. If it was planned or not, we're not 100% sure. They're always going to tell you it was planned, but Leo had kind of gotten everybody on board for this X Factor run.
And we should note that one of the reasons that everybody was so on board with it is the book is extremely queer friendly.
Right? The representation is there. It's on the panel. You can tell it was woven into the story, and it was heartfelt and genuine. And I think that's where a lot of Leah's writing comes from. There are people who are on both sides of the fence, whether she's a good writer or not such a good writer.
And maybe just not your cup of tea. Right.
Right. And I think that's where a lot of sort of the boiling point for what happened in X Factor 10 happened, or, how it occurred, because what we've got is, I'm not sure how far into spoilers that we get here, because I'm honestly more interested in the discourse that happened because of the events and sort of what we saw take place in comics fandom.
We're, 2 weeks? No, 1 week out. God, it feels like it's been 2 weeks, but I guess it has been just one since the issue dropped. I feel like, especially at this point with this particular issue, we can definitely wade into spoiler territory. But just in case, spoiler warning on. Go.
Yeah, right. This is sort of where we're at now, because a lot of, I won't go through the whole premise of what X Factor is all about, but we ended up at a point where the Prodigy character is mishandled in a pretty unique way, and having sort of that queer trauma basically rush through a subplot, a B plot, into their rapist and a murderer kind of coming face to face, and all of that culminating into just the furthering of a plot point for iBoy and greater overarching narratives. And it was done in a way that did not feel like it was meant to be so short and sort of pushed to the side in a B plot where we only got a couple of pages of content that wrapped up this Prodigy storyline. And it was tough to read, really. It was kind of clear that this is a story that needed more time to flesh out and to explore in a way that was genuine to that type of trauma that these characters are going through. And what happened with X Factor kind of represents, what we see in comics in general, where this book was beloved by so many X-Men fans. I mean, whenever we broke the news that it was ending, back when the solicitations were hitting and we got confirmation that it was closing, I mean, people could not stop talking about it. They were distraught that X Factor is ending.
Well, I mean,
then,
it's really just a very charming and fun book with lots of great
right.
characterization and, like you said, Nick, lots of great representation for the LGBTQ community, and it got cut short, and that sucks. And I feel like there was a lot of people felt this book and took it on as their Marvel or their X-Men book, you know? And
Right.
maybe
Yeah,
I'm
I
totally
totally
wrong.
get that.
I don't want to try to misrepresent anybody.
No,
But
because
there was definitely a certain sense of attachment in a positive way to this
right.
book, a lot of pride, for lack of a better term.
So
And
good. Yeah.
for the book to be cut short was one thing, and then for Prodigy's murder to get turned into be revealed as racially motivated, as
Right.
Queer hate motivated, and just kind of quickly get brushed aside, smacked a lot of people wrong. And
Yeah.
you can split hairs over whether or not it got rushed because the book was getting canned, but at the end of the day, people weren't happy, and a lot of people decided to manifest that displeasure in some really disgusting ways.
Right.
And
I mean, we saw
like,
social media basically turn on the whole creative team.
yeah. I
And
mean, Leah
they
Williams is getting like death threats and
right.
being told she should kill herself. And I mean, just this awful discourse. And it wasn't just a couple of isolated incidents. It was full-blown, full-throated tidal wave of just vitriol.
Right.
And there's a conversation about the conversation to be had, like you were saying, Nick.
Yeah, that's where we're at, right?
Yeah, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, we're in the conversation about the conversation. It's wild.
Because you've got a subset of fans that pride themselves on inclusion and tolerance, and then when somebody that they champion fails to live up to their expectations, they just viciously turn on them. I mean, devil's advocate, I think Leah Williams was probably put in a no-win situation, and she dropped the ball. And
in a no-win situation.
It does happen. Yeah. She was in a no-win situation and dropped the ball. And you know what? It does happen.
Yeah.
And Nick, I'm not sure. Has she had any sort of public explanation for?
I haven't seen anything.
Comment? I mean, she's been extremely quiet to my knowledge.
Right. Just kind of retweeting some of the good reviews. We put out a pretty positive review about it. All things considered.
I love David Baldeon's art. I'd never read a Leah Williams story prior to this, but I'm very curious to look at more of her work now.
And hang with us, because this is coming back around to where we're going with the United States.
We promise we're getting to Captain America here.
This is gonna build its way up, and it's gonna make sense, because as journalists, as comic journalists, and what we do with comic reviews and even looking at analysis and commentary, it puts us in a weird position, because you've got a book that we need to talk about the shortcomings of X Factor 10, and we need to be able to talk about how, queer trauma and these types of storylines cannot be rushed and, pushed aside to a B plot in 2 or 3 pages.
Right.
But we also need to do that in a way that is not fueling harassment with creators. So what we saw on social media was a lot of, well thought out analysis and critiques of what these have happened, and getting lumped into the harassment campaign that was going on, and it all being just fuel for the fire. And that's something that is an important distinction for us to make because of what we do at Comic Watch. Because, if our reviewer was not keen on X Factor 10 and wrote a negative review on that, does that put us in a position where we are fueling that hatred? And there's got to be a room for what we're doing. There's got to be room for comics discourse to say there are shortcomings in X Factor 10, but also you cannot harass these creators, because that is inherently wrong.
Well, there's just miles of distance between the two things, Nick.
There
I
are.
mean, Gabriel's review was very well thought out and made extremely solid points. And I mean, he put his heart on his sleeve in that review because he was one of
Yeah.
our biggest champions of that book.
And he knew going into it the weight that he would have.
There's just no way whatsoever that something like that should be lumped in with the just evil and frankly cowardly harassment that was happening online. I mean, trolls are going to do that. Unfortunately, it's just something that as a society we're still figuring out how to navigate online culture and discourse in a healthy way that doesn't devolve into this, because as has been well spoken of and documented, being anonymously online creates a fearlessness that you can just say whatever you want, and that fearlessness sometimes manifests itself in these extraordinarily negative ways.
Right.
It's just sad when you've got people that are supposedly championing this inclusive book who become the thing that they're supposed to hate or be opposed to.
Like, because we get advanced review copies from Marvel just basically a couple of hours before they release. And, we're expected to have this tight turnaround on our reviews. And I felt for Gabrielle, who is like understanding the weight of this issue and what's about to happen, and also knowing they're about to put out their thoughts. And like you said, they're putting their heart on the line in this review, and knowing that it's going to publish right alongside all of that vitriol and all of that hate. And I think that it's an important lesson in kind of what we do in comics journalism to kind of set that distinguished bar, that distinguished line between, thoughtful and honest analysis and critiques versus trolling by, the Twitter trolls.
And the sad reality is it's the loudest voices that get the most attention.
Right. And that 12 minutes and 40 seconds into this show is a wonderful segue.
Why, yes, it is, Nick. I just eat it right up for you there, buddy.
You did too, because the loudest voices are what everybody's listening to. And you know who has a loud voice, especially when it comes to matters of America? Unfortunately,
who?
How do I put it nicely? I'm going to say the Fox News empire, because that's where a lot of our discussion behind the scenes came into, bringing this episode to life and welcoming you to the United States of Captain America.
The United States of Captain America. Let's do this.
Let's do it.
What a great comic. Came out last week. Had a lot of advanced fanfare. Now, the premise, if you're not familiar with it at this point, is writer Christopher Cantwell is pairing up with writers, different writers of each issue of this 5-issue miniseries to present different iterations of Captain America all across the lived-in experience and spectrum of the United States. And each of the writers that he is teaming up with are representative of those individuals in each issue. So the first issue introduces Aaron Fisher, the Captain America of the Railways. And guess what? He's gay. Cool. I love this. And guess what? He's a really fun character too. Rock solid origin story. I want to read more about this guy. Subsequent issues have Native American and I believe AAPI representation, and I am drawing a complete blank on the other two, but it's a great idea because it's reflective of the idea that America means different things to different people, regardless of who no matter who they are and where they are in the country. It's something different. It's experiential. And sometimes the idea of American dream can take on a negative connotation or a more real, very, very tangled story. And so into this wonderful series, in waded Fox News and with their usual self-awareness and regard for facts, they they decided that they had to talk to three different people about this matter. And the first was Senator Tom Cotton, who is a diehard MAGA and very, very crafty and just kind of a giant piece of shit all around. But he's great for coming. He loves to come on TV and give a soundbite because it gives him attention, right? So he came on and, hey, we're talking about immigration and the border and burr, they took our jobs. And, about halfway through this interview with Senator Cotton, here we're going to talk about how Captain America hates America now. Brr. And the tenor of the conversation is basically, if you don't love America, leave it. There's no room to question the sanctity of loving America. How dare you question our history? And yes, he gave a little bit of lip service to, well, we haven't always gotten it right, but, and they have to, you see, they have to say these things in order to cover their ass. Because then they get someone like us, or, people that are like us, but way more famous, bite back at them. They can say, well, I definitely said that we've never gotten it right, or we haven't always got it right. And, just this idea, and the passage in question, I'm going to actually read it verbatim, is some narration from Cap right at the beginning. And he says, I'm loyal to nothing except a dream. I actually said that once. Here's the thing about a dream, though. A dream isn't real. When we wake up, it goes away, and we're left with this yearning inside, like something was taken from us. At least that's one kind of dream. But lately, spending my days in this country, as the years march on by, I'm starting to think America actually has two dreams and one lie. The first American dream is the one that isn't real. It's the one some people expect to just be handed to them. And then they get angry when it disappears, when the truth is it never really existed in the first place. That's deep.
Right.
That's extremely deep. And there is absolutely nothing more patriotic than questioning authority in the United States. We're built on the idea of questioning authority.
Right? Like, it's such a wild and here's the thing with that, even that intro, what this discourse is about, and it's totally the opposite side of comics discourse. And it's a way for us to kind of address these issues that come up in these topics that we find ourselves talking about, because comics are so inherently an American method of entertainment and a method of expression, and it finds itself so entangled in what America is. And who better to explore that than Captain America? There's a lot to be said about the mutant metaphor and how that ties so intrinsically into our struggle for freedom of expression and belief and things like that. But Captain America hits to that Fox News audience, right? I mean, there's a lot of sound bites that we can build on this.
Superficially, he's literally a guy who runs around wearing the American flag. That superficial understanding of Captain America is just red meat to the red state crowd. And so for something to come out, and this is very far from the first time Cap has ever questioned the government. I mean, I was not joking when I said Fox doesn't do their homework, and they know exactly where their place is in the culture wars and how to stoke those culture war flames. And it just shouldn't shock anybody that a complete and utter disregard for Captain America's history, including the fact that he started out punching Hitler before we were in World War II. That is in case you hadn't heard, that's an inherently political statement right there on the cover. Thank you, Jack Kirby, who had a few things to say about punching Nazis himself. And just the boneheadedness. But, I mean, we shouldn't be surprised at this point, Nick.
No, definitely not. And that's not why we're here. It's exactly what they do. So what we do, we cannot take the responsibility to set the record straight on everything that they say about comics and everything they say about fandom, because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they're doing this to stoke the fire, they're doing this to get sound bites. But what we can do is talk about how right this comic is and what it means for America right now. And I think what we see within those first few pages and what Fox News kind of latched onto, and what we see in a lot of the social media discourse about how this book is about woke Marvel and about how, you know, they're pandering and all of this type of thing. Because, yeah, Aaron Fisher, who is like the Railroad's Captain America, is queer. And it's pretty important to the storyline that put Aaron Fisher in this place to become Captain America and kind of take up that mantle, because they come from a place of disenfranchisement and wanting to do better for their community. And it's such an American story. And that's
Right.
why when you
What's
read the
more Captain
comic,
America than that?
when you read the comic, you're like, shit, this is so American. And I'm
Yeah.
not the person who's running around, you know, promoting heavy nationalist views and things like that. And even this made me feel a bit of pride, even outside of just seeing Aaron Fisher on the page.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I think we're going to see a lot of in the future. But this issue in particular really hammers into the notion that, you know, being pro immigration does not mean you're anti American, like Fox News would have you believe.
Right.
That is sort of what I took from this book immediately, right within the first few pages, is establishing that American identity for a diverse population. And that's something that
Absolutely.
we get into, that the two American dreams, because it's so important that we're able to bring in the context of this release with Ta-Nehisi Coates ending his Captain America run, which was
Mm-hmm.
pretty heavily founded on the notion of the American dream. And Ta-Nehisi Coates has done a lot of writing with The Atlantic and other publishers about what the American dream means, because it's intrinsic to a lot of hurtful and harmful things for not just Black people, but for disenfranchised people in general.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what we get into this with the American dream and what it means and how there could be two dreams is pretty intrinsic to this idea of what we put on the mantle of Captain America and what we put on the shoulders of this character, because they're kind of meant to be that picket fence ideal for, you know, not just Marvel, but for comics characters. And what they did is they turned that picket fence into an analogy for where a lot of Fox News audience goes towards, with that not being
It's
a gateway to bring people in, but to be a wall to keep people out. And that's
well,
where
and
we
it's
get
a
into the
myth.
notion of,
It's
right.
a myth, and that's actually something that a little bit further on in the opening pages Cantwell gets into.
Mm-hmm.
Is not hold on, let me. Germans have this neat word, Fernweh, or Fernweh. It means a longing, a nostalgia for a place you've never been, or for a place that might not even exist at all. We have a word for this in the United States, Americana. This is the
Oh,
white picket fence fallacy that, if we're not careful, becomes nationalism or jingoism. That dream isn't real. It never was, because that dream doesn't get along nicely with reality. Other cultures, immigrants, the poor, the suffering, people easily come to be seen as different or un American. The white picket fence becomes a gate to keep no others out. We're at our best when we keep no one out. A good dream is shared, shared radically, shared with everyone. When something isn't shared, it can become the American lie. So, of course, Fox omitted good chunks of that with their ellipses and reframed the quote in such a way to make it sound like Cap is just shitting all over America, right? Because of course they did. I mean,
right. Of course they did.
of
But
course
it's the
they did.
idea of taking the white picket fence analogy and turning that into a wall to keep out any
Mm-hmm.
sense of population or any diversity, any immigration, any difference of thought or culture or
Sure.
behavior. It's a wild accusation. And of course it's, you know, batshit crazy. But when you get into the book, it's not just the fact that they have a keen understanding of Captain America. They've tapped into a nationalism that fits within our worldview today in
Mm-hmm.
applying the idea of what it means to be American. Because it isn't taking it away from anybody. It's applying it to more people and being inclusive and welcoming. And we see that in just the behaviors of Cap and Falcon and kind of how they discover Aaron Fisher. And then they realize, wait, you're not alone. Like, there's more people taking up this mantle. And it's like, yes, there are more people who are prideful to be American who are not aligned with Fox News. And it's sort of that enlightenment discovery. And I understanding that, you know, what it is to be American does align with Captain America, and that does not align with what we're seeing from Tom Cotton and Fox News and all of them.
Well, no,
So,
because their idea of what is America, like you were saying, is baseball, apple pie, this jingoist nationalist fantasy that never existed. This
right.
Ozzie and Harriet 1950s white picket fence, emphasis on white, perfect world where there was no juvenile delinquency and black people were seen and not heard, and women stayed in the kitchen, and those damn queers stayed in the closet, or they were, you know, illegal and thrown in jail or just killed, and yeah, and so on and so forth. So there's just always been, and when I say always, but probably if you want to really get into culture war crap, you really start seeing this surge in the 70s with the rise of the moral majority kind of picking at the evangelical movement, and then Reagan hits office and it really ramps up, and then Clinton is in office in the 90s, and now they have a foil, and then 9/11 happens, right? And then the 9/11 happens, suddenly it's, you know, everybody loses their shit because we got attacked. And I mean, we should have all banded together. There was like this brief shining moment, Nick, where everybody was like, oh, it's on. But that quickly changed. And we all became, and suddenly, to borrow a phrase from Chris Rock, patriotism became hatredism. And anyone that wasn't American, freedom fries, you know, became suspect. And the left became castigated for not just knee-jerk following along with what the Bush administration was doing. And that led to the Tea Party, which was a rebuttal to Obama, which ultimately led us to this terrible, terrible moment where Donald John Trump is somehow elected president of the United States despite losing the popular vote by 3 million votes. And that leads us to this moment where there is just this, and it's weird, it's almost surreal, because you see the cracks have finally formed in the right's bullshit, but they won't admit it. They can't admit it, so they cling more desperately to the lie. So Captain America, he hates America now. Oh, is that a convenient scapegoat? Look at the loony left. Look at what they're doing. Look at this propaganda they're spewing. Look at Captain Woke. He needs to be demoted to Lieutenant America or Private First Class America. And then, of course, Dean Cain has to weigh in, and some idiotic Michael Loftus, comedian, gives his hot take, and it's just bullshit. If you can take anything from this discussion that I have completely commandeered, I'm sorry, Nick. No bullshit when you hear it. Please.
And this is why
thinking skills.
Like, I'm glad that you kind of gave that quick American history recap from about 70s forward. Missed a lot of stuff, but what it does is set the context for why we can get this idea of anything that might question the sanctity of America, or might question our history or our treatment of individuals, our treatment of different cultures, anything that shines a light on any type of treatment that isn't perfect for textbooks to show American exceptionalism is a form of anti-American propaganda. But what we get out of the United States of Captain America, even in just number one, is this juxtaposition of Captain America and the mantle that he stands for and the history that he has had, coming face to face with a boy from the rail yards who picked up the mantle and is queer and is trying to protect his family, or his people,
and
his
it's awesome.
And then you've got in future issues, I mean, to put this into context in this contrast that they're creating in putting Captain America as we know him and as the next iteration and Sam as Captain America as we know him face to face with these types of communities, we've got Joe Gomez.
Gollum?
I'm so sorry. A whole other spiel about Lord of the Rings that I was into right before the show, and I cannot get that out of my head. Yes. So we've got Joe Gomez here, and I've got an image pulled up, if I can be so quick as to share it, because it's an important thing to show. This image is everything that the United States of Captain America to me is about. It's about seeing the legacy of Steve Rogers as Captain America confronted with the legacy of how we've treated people and finding that sense of nationality, even in that acknowledgement of historical context. Because these two standing together with Steve Rogers and Joe Gomez, I mean, it's straight chills every time I see it. And it
awesome
represents, right? It's so beautiful.
That really is. Nick, do you know offhand who the artist is? Because I'm not recognizing the style.
I really should have pulled that up before to find out who the artist is. But the point I want to make about this, and I'll see if I can find the artist in the meantime.
Here, you go ahead. I got it.
I believe it's Gerald Perel featuring Joe Gomez. Okay. And they've also got artist David Cutler involved in this. So what this image does, and what we see in the first issue of the United States of Captain America, is it puts maybe even our own American lie in what we created in Steve Rogers, and even this next iteration in Sam Wilson. It puts that face to face with the harm that we've done to communities.
Yes.
In the United States.
That right there, that just touches on another hot button topic right now that's unfortunately become a wedge issue, even though it absolutely shouldn't, and that's critical race theory.
Right, that's something that we've seen, and that ties into the idea of if you might have a question about how we've treated disenfranchised communities in the past, that equals anti-Americanism. And this series is taking that notion head on and saying we can look face to face with disenfranchised communities that we've harmed in the past, and we can find a common community in being American, and that does not equate to anti-Americanness.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, I mean, owning up to your mistakes makes us all stronger. And you were right, it is Gerald Perel, as far as the artist for that cover goes.
Very cool.
I'm not familiar with, but I definitely am going to be on the lookout for. But a perfect example, I mean, post-World War II Germany, they have for 70 years absolutely taught about what they did. So that everybody's aware. It's like, yes, we made this horrendous mistake, and you need to be aware of it. And this is what we've done to try to make amends for it since then, and what we're still doing to make it right. The United States doesn't have that self-awareness yet.
And this is the type of story. Right. This is the self-awareness of the United States, right? And I think that's even a meta commentary on the name of the United States of Captain America because of what Captain America represents. And, roping in the Ta-Nehisi Coates series and sort of what Captain America means as tugging the line of this American dream, and us further analyzing the American dream as probably a lie that never existed. It means a dedication from Marvel that in the midst of all of their screw ups, to me, they have my respect for, because
absolutely
they are making Captain America represent what I feel like America can represent. Mm-hmm. They're putting their money where their mouth is on this one. And they're showing that America isn't this baseball apple pie, get out if you don't like it type of country. This is America, and this is what Captain America can represent, and this is what the character can stand for, not just within the Marvel universe, but in our own reality, where Fox News is talking about it and trying to complain about it being woke Captain America. But it's the most American thing that Marvel has done in quite a long time, and
Yeah.
putting it right. So we get the end of Ta-Nehisi Coates right at the same time that this series
Yes.
launches.
Yes.
And to me, that's a dedication to the ideals that is being put behind the character right now. And the expansion of it, well, in the United States of Captain America #1, in the back half of the episode of the issue, we get Sam Wilson, as this mural on a wall, and then Aaron Fisher standing right in front of him, looking up, and with his hands on his hips, and that's where he kind of gets the notion that he can take up this mantle. That's Steve Rogers inspiring Sam Wilson, inspiring Aaron Fisher, inspiring a whole network of Captain Americas throughout the country.
Yeah.
And it's that type of patriotism that is American. And it's that type of patriotism that's applicable to diversity, that's welcoming to different cultures and different methods of behaving and beliefs. And, to see a segment discuss it as, or frame it as, anti-American, I don't know what else to say except read the book.
Yes.
Because the main thing that I'm getting
do you
is
think
these
Tom
are not
Cotton
people,
or Dean Cain actually read this comic? Of course
right?
not.
Of course they didn't.
I'm not even sure Dean Cain knows how to read.
But that's the issue that we're facing here, and not to rope it into some larger discussion of not reading enough comics, because of course we're on that bandwagon where everybody needs to read more comics. But this is the idea of comics taking on what we're facing as a nation, as a people, and putting that into a form of expression that we can latch onto, that not just shows how comics are so powerful, but how they're so powerful for American expression. Yes. And the idea that they're tackling Americana with a character who's tied so closely to Americana shows that Marvel's got this keen understanding of where this character needs to be placed in this cultural moment. And the fact that Fox News is pissed off about it, the fact that we're here talking about how great of a comic it is, shows that they've done their job right on this one.
Oh, yeah. If you've pissed off Fox, you've done something right. Absolutely. And now that kind of leads us to the finale for Ta-Nehisi Coates' run. About 3 years in the making. The first issue of the run debuted 4th of July week, 2018. So yes, 3 years in the making, give or take a break for COVID. But Coates' run. Now, if you're not familiar with Ta-Nehisi Coates, you need to be. He and Ibrahim X. Kendi are probably my two favorite writers discussing matters of race and America, and just really asking very sharp questions and putting deep thought into it. And I mean, Coates is just a brilliant guy. So for him, and he's been writing Black Panther since was it 14 or 15? I think
15 or
something
16,
like that. And
yeah.
I mean, he got his comics right. He's a journalist by trade, but he starts dipping his toe in writing Black Panther, and he produces A Nation Under Our Feet, which is probably the best Black Panther story I've ever read. And what's interesting about it is the way that he crafts the story is that any action beats that it has are secondary to these larger philosophical points about the state of what a nation is and how it's built, that are being discussed, that really form the backbone of this story. And it's just incredibly intelligent and cerebral and thought-provoking stuff. So when this dude is announced as taking over Captain America, you know it's going to be something really incredible, especially given the zeitgeist into which this comic was dropped into mid-2018. So, I mean, it should come as no surprise that Ta-Nehisi Coates' Captain America run is basically Captain America versus the United States of Donald Trump. Not Trump, but Trumpism. And that's important distinction, because Ta-Nehisi Coates is way too smart to hit the nail directly on the head like that. And he instead starts looking at, what does Captain America mean when you have such a sharp division amongst Americans as to what America even is. how can Cap represent this entire nation when fully half of the nation is living in a fantasy world? And I mean, geez, this is before QAnon even became part of the discussion and got even wackier. So,
and also, like, if I could add a little bit of context, I think we're also coming in. Ta-Nehisi Coates comes into Captain America right around the time of Secret Empire, where you've got Hail Hydra Captain America. Right after, right? Like, I mean, right in that mix. So you've got Hail Hydra Captain America all over Twitter when you're announcing Ta-Nehisi Coates is taking over this character. A writer who got their popularity and fame from an Atlantic article primarily that was called The Case for Reparations.
Yes.
This is the writer who's going to take on Captain America in an environment and in an atmosphere where you've just made Cap a secret agent for Hydra. So now you've got Ta-Nehisi Coates coming in, and the whole Captain America run, I feel like, is an analysis or look into an institutionalized Captain America trying to break out of that and what that means within American institutions. And that's kind of where you see the ideals of Trumpism come into play, because they're so ingrained into our, not only our historical development, but also our current operations and, you know, our modes of thinking. And Ta-Nehisi Coates uses the mantle and this ideal of Captain America trying to break free of being an agent of Hydra and to establish
public perception.
Yeah, that public perception, because this is a Captain America who isn't
trusted. Him, it was a fake him or something. I forget exactly how it worked.
There was not the actual.
It was really weird.
The actual
I think a cosmic cube was involved.
Yeah, the cosmic cube is where Cap was, and Cap comes back and fights the Hydra. But the people don't know this.
Yeah,
the people still see Captain America, and they're like, Hail Hydra,
this guy tried to subjugate us.
Yeah, they're basically Twitter, because now Twitter hates Captain America because they're a Hydra agent. And that's what we get out of this run, is this take on institutionalism, because Cap pretty quickly ends up in prison, and you get the fight with Nuke, I believe, with the American flag over his face, and then all the different versions of him. You get this type of imagery really, really quickly, that Captain America has been someone who's tugged this institutional line, or this American dream ideal, and has a sense of awareness. That sense of awareness that we just talked about for the United States of Captain America #1 that just dropped, Ta-Nehisi Coates has injected into this character years ago already. And I think, seeing the end of that run and seeing Ta-Nehisi Coates sort of finish his work with the character, which is obviously going to stand the test of time, which we'll be talking about.
We'll be talking about this 10, 20 years from now.
Right. Like, that's just what this type of character is. That's what this type of run was. And the significance of it is that it can bring us something like the United States of Captain America #1, and it's such a natural evolution. Aaron Fisher falls right in line for where this character's mantle should mean, and what it means in today's cultural moment for the United States. And wow, for them to drop the ball on X Factor #10, going back to the beginning of our discussion, where they're cutting it short. Now Leah's kind of, there's probably some issues. Who I've heard Leah was writing like issue 11 when they heard that it was being canceled, so they had to fit everything into 10. But you've got Marvel pulling that while also putting out something like the United States of Captain America #1 and furthering Ta-Nehisi Coates' original ideals that he put into the character. I'm glad that they got this one right, because at this moment, it's an important thing to get right. And I don't want to lose Ta-Nehisi Coates, but it's always the comics conundrum, right? Like, you don't want to lose them on this run, but you're super excited for what they're picking up next.
I'm not even sure if they've announced who the next writer for Cap is, have they?
I don't think so. We're still in this moment.
It's been a weird mystery. Like, we should definitely have known this about 2 months ago.
Right. And that's sort of they're promoting this series right now that's got a bunch of creatives involved, and they're taking it to a bunch of different places.
I can't imagine that United States of Cap isn't teeing Christopher Cantwell up to be the next Captain America writer. I think there's something there.
And
he's also writing Iron Man, so that would actually be 2 of their big 3 big 3 Avengers characters in Cantwell's hands, which is pretty damn impressive, actually.
And if you read The Mask from Christopher Cantwell over at Dark
Oh, I
Horse
didn't.
Comics,
Mm-hmm.
brought back the original ideals of The Mask, which
Oh,
was
with pretty violent
like
and anarchic.
very violent, sort of anarchist, like very taking
Yeah.
on political, and it's very like vote for the mask. Super political, super topical, very insightful. And I could see Cantwell doing really cool things with the character. But
Yeah.
the shoes of Ta-Nehisi Coates are not easy to follow. And I do not envy whoever has to follow up with that 30-issue run
They're going to
because
want to go in a somewhat different direction, you know?
right.
Like, and I
You've
don't
got
want to,
to.
it shouldn't be it shouldn't be such a different direction that fans get thrown off their game, though. Like when Rick
Right.
Remender did the Dimension Z story immediately following Brubaker's end, and everyone was like, "The hell is this? Monsters in Dimension Z? Why?" I'll defend that run despite its flaws.
See, that's the thing. Like,
I mean, the juxtaposition of the two is the thing.
Right.
Like, you want to do something that feels different, and so the title's not treading water, but at the same time you want to build on these themes that Coates has laid out. And I mean, right now I think Christopher Cantwell is actually making a really, really good case to follow in his footsteps. And shit, if he can bring Dale Eaglesham along for the art, woo, I'd be all right with that.
So true. So look, we've got the United States of Captain America as sort of this it's not really an ongoing, it's a mini series. I don't know if it's 5 or 6 issues. And you've got Cantwell and Eaglesham kind of taking on the A story that is the main story of the United States of Captain America. And then you follow up with the one who took on the mantle, the community that they're exploring in the back half of the issue. And that's where they're bringing on a lot of different creative teams.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's for Joe Gomez. You've got for Joe Gomez
Trujillo was the secondary writer in this issue, I believe.
Yes. And for the one with Joe Gomez, who's part of the Kickapoo tribe, they're bringing in Darcy Little Badger and David Cutler. They're doing this for a lot of different series, and I think it's a cool idea to examine, where we're at with this character and then what they're inspiring all within the same issue. And it also could be a good way to, like you said, lead into Christopher Cantwell taking on just Captain America. And this is sort of a pivot point that we find ourselves in now of seeing Ta-Nehisi Coates come into the Captain America character and create a foundation and a mode of inspiration that can carry out into the United States of Captain America.
Yep,
and we can see that branch out into all these different ways, into facing the harm that we've created, into coming face to face with the idea of the American dream and this white picket fence fallacy. But how do you pivot out of that? How do you pivot out of something like this, capitalizing on such a monumental event, and to find, a writer like Cantwell, any other writer, how do you pivot out of this? And I think that's going to be the significant moment for Marvel to really show the commitment that they showed in continuing Ta-Nehisi Coates and doubling down on that. And I think that, honestly, it's making me more and more of a Captain America fan. And I think this is, I don't know, not to get too sentimental, but this is my America, right? Like, this is what I want to see out of it. And
absolutely, like, this is the America that I would fight for.
Right. Like this is exactly what we're looking for.
I'm not going to fight for your white picket fence fallacy.
Right. And what we see between the just the sort of brotherhood between, Cap and Falcon, between Steve and Sam, you get this almost like cool Predators meme moment of them like all muscled up shaking hands at the end, and I love that.
Just on a beach.
I love that so much.
Who doesn't love Predator, man?
As soon as I saw
especially that
how
moment.
muzzled they are, I was like, oh, I know what that is. But it's so representative of kind of what they're doing with what it means to wear a mantle like Captain America, because it could so easily be misconstrued. And I think we see that in the first few pages where there's one panel of a guy who's just like, fucking raging on a retail store employee who's wearing a Captain America t-shirt. And then the next panel is a fan who's sitting at their computer wearing a Captain America t-shirt, like drinking out of their cup and just like enjoying themselves and having a good time, and showing how this character can be used for both good and bad and how it can be interpreted in these different ways. And then Marvel like taking the steps to say, this is how it is. Like, you cannot misconstrue this. To me, it's a moment of the Punisher ripping up the Punisher sticker off the cop's car.
I think it's a lot bigger than that, because
exactly.
I think the Punisher moment that you're referring to from Rosenberg's run is very specific to a very specific thing. Whereas there's just a wealth of broad discussion to be had off of the minutia of just about every panel of this comic.
And there's not just like in the Punisher from Rosenberg, and then I think it's Punisher number 19 if you want to check it out. 15, somewhere in that area.
I think 16 was the last issue. It's towards the
end.
Is
it 15? Okay, so I think it's towards the end. I think it's around 15. What we find is not just one panel where you can address it. There's so much there that you almost need a mini series, right? Like you need all of these different ways.
Ongoing series,
right? This could be an ongoing so easily.
Oh yeah.
It like now you have this network of Captain Americas basically who have taken up the mantle, but you need that time to explore, because it's what we found in X Factor 10. I'm going to rope that back in and maybe shoehorn it, but the problem with X Factor 10 is that not that they tackled this storyline. That's not the issue. The issue is that it wasn't handled correctly, and it was given about 2 pages to do it.
It's given about 3 panels. What are you talking about?
Right? Yeah. It's true. Like there was literally 3 panels before they're like, now this is all about Eye-Boy.
Yeah, it's like this mustache twirler is like, I killed you because you're black and gay and a mutant. Bang! He's dead. Oh, cool. Eye-Boy, you're so powerful. That's it.
Right? Like that is not the idea of it. Is that it's not bad that you took on that trauma and that storytelling approach. The problem is that it wasn't handled correctly and given enough time.
Yeah.
What we're seeing in the United States of Captain America is something that's handled correctly and being given enough time. They've put the support behind it with the right breathing room. Right? And this is showing what this publisher can do within weeks of each other of the release dates.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, we're seeing this in action. And I think that's an important moment to see what comics are capable of and see that potential. But you've got to work with it because it's there and it's monumental if it can happen correctly. And United States of Captain America #1 is an example of that happening correctly. X Factor #10 is an example of what can go wrong.
Yep, absolutely. What a perfect comparison between right and wrong there, Nick.
We stumbled into that one, didn't we?
We did. Boy, look at us. The only way it could have gone better is if our buddy Mike had been able to make it. Mike, I really hope you're safe over there right now. And, just come back next week because we'll be waiting for you, pal. That's good. Mike is with us in spirit. But at the end of the day, Nick, people are always going to choose their interpretation of what America is. And there's so many factors behind X factors, you might say, behind why they do it and why they come by their beliefs. You and I both are the black sheep liberals of our families, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. It's so true.
Like we can both speak from experience.
Right.
When we say it's like, folks, just think critically about what you're being spoon-fed. And if it automatically confirms your feelings, then it's probably confirmation biased. The United States of Captain America, though, is just a fucking awesome comic. And that is undeniable.
To you exactly from Texas and Oklahoma, where people like Fox News would guarantee that like this is not what's supposed to be coming from Texas and Oklahoma, but this is the reality of it, and this is the reality that the United States of Captain America is facing, and that's why it's such a powerful comic, and that's why it's so important.
Absolutely. Well, with that, I think we've reached the end of our discourse on the discourse of the discourse. And so, Nick, thank you so much for such awesome discussion. As usual. I is it next week we've got another guest? I don't want to spoil anything, but I thought it was next week or the week after. But we've got some cool shit happening, folks. So keep your eyes peeled. Comic Watch itself, really keep your eye on the prize in 2022. We've got some stuff brewing, and you are not going to be you're not going to be ready for it.
That's for sure.
We may not be ready for it. I don't know, but thank you so much for listening. Remember, this land is my land, and this land is your land. And Woody Guthrie said it best, man. So just go forth, support your local comic store, read a history book, please. Yes,
what a read.
Those reading things without pictures. Yeah, I know, right? And above all, just be good to each other. Be supportive. Listen to somebody that has a different opinion from you. Be respectful in your rebuttal of their difference of opinion or mindset. And just remember that a person most of the time is not their opinion on one thing. Everything is and everyone is multifaceted. And the sooner we all accept that, the sooner we're all going to actually live up to the ideals of the United States of Captain America. Thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.